And thank you for joining today's listening session on the Federal Communications Commission's ongoing work to ensure just and reasonable rates for communication services provided to incarcerated people and their families. My name is Paloma Perez. I am the Communications Director for the FCC and the moderator of today's event. Before we get started, I'd like to invite Colette Payne for a welcome to the Women's Justice Institute Reclamation Center. For those who don't know Colette was appointed to serve as the first director of the Women's Justice Institute Reclamation Project in 2020. The first initiative of its kind in Illinois to be led by and for system-impacted women. In her role, Colette engages women directly impacted by the criminal legal system to become agents of change and to create solutions to end the incarceration of women and girls. And with that, I'll welcome Colette to the podium. Of course.
Good afternoon, everyone. Hey. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Colette Payne, the director of the Reclamation Center here with the Women's Justice Institute. The Women's Justice Institute is a dynamic think and do tank that collaborates and consults with a wide range of stakeholders to end women's mass incarceration, reduce harm to impacted women, their children and families, improve health, well-being, and outcomes among them. I am so glad we are having this communication justice conversation. I served my first prison sentence at the age of 14. My mom and dad didn't have much, raising 6 children, sending us to Catholic school, feeding us, housing and clothing us. It wasn't enough money to carve out for phone calls so that I could call home. I cycled in and out of jails and prisons for years. And I wasn't always able to speak with my own children during my incarceration. No mother wants to see their children incarcerated, and I found myself in that same place that my mother was in. My youngest was incarcerated in Iowa at Polk County Jail, and the phone cost was ridiculous. Between making sure he had commissary, video visits, and phone calls, I had to sacrifice and make a way for him to stay connected. He got his time, went to federal prison where the phone calls were free. They gave everyone there 1,000 minutes each month, which is the right thing to do. Keep families connected. Ooh, and I'm having a hot flash. My God, Jesus, excuse the sweating. It just happened. Oh my God, I'm sorry. My experience, somebody give me a tissue. My experience is why I do this work. And I work with an amazing team of experts, formerly incarcerated women. We work across, thank you so much. We work across sectors to build transformative solutions that include innovative data-driven systems, assessment tools, and the development of programs and policies rooted in the research of women's unique justice pathways before, during, and after incarceration. Can my team please stand up? I just want y'all to meet the amazing team. Alexis, Sandra, Keisha, Diana is somewhere greeting people. Deanne, our co-founder, she believes in us. She entrusted us with this work because we're experts in this field. In 2021, we launched our groundbreaking report titled Redefine the Narrative, centering the voices of women with lived experience, making available a blueprint as to how we can work together at providing pathways to justice by exploring 5 rights and needs, which every woman deserves. Relationship safety, health and well-being, safe and stable housing, economic security and empowerment, supported families. In the economic security and empowerment chapter, we have top 10 recommendations in all chapters. But in that chapter, number 8, eliminate exploitive prison survival costs by ensuring more equitable prison commissary, communications justice, and dignified access to basic needs. We are grateful to elevate WJSI's communication platform by exploring what we coined PSCs, prison survival costs, that will ensure more equitable access to communications justice for all that are warehoused in a correctional facility. We are glad to have Lieutenant Governor Juliana Stratton here. Eldridge Stratton has been a longstanding partner of our work. We are excited for this continued partnership. We are grateful to Illinois Senator Tammy Duckworth and her team for hosting this communications justice conversation here at the Reclamation Center to envision opportunities that reduce harm caused by exploitive practices that harm families impacted by incarceration. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Colette. And thank you, Anna, for hosting us and welcoming us into this space. Today's listening session will obtain additional public comment in support of the Commission's ongoing efforts to ensure just and reasonable rates and charges for incarcerated people's communication services and engage the public in their continued efforts, bolstered by the Martha Wright-Reed Just and Communications Act of 2022. For those who aren't keeping track at home, the FCC is moving quickly to implement the Martha Wright-Reed Just and Reasonable Communications Act of 2022 and initiated a rulemaking proceeding in March of 2023. This listening session will complement and supplement the extensive record developed so far in response to the Commission's notice of proposed rulemaking. Specifically, we will hear from formerly incarcerated people and their loved ones about their experiences using incarcerated people's communication services. This listening session will become part of the public record for this proceeding, which the Commission will rely on to adopt the just and reasonable rates required under the law. Please note that given our limited time today, we couldn't accommodate dedicated time for questions or comments from the audience. However, we highly encourage you to share your thoughts and comments, and there are multiple ways you can do so, specifically 3, and I'll learn those now. First, you can submit formal comments into the record. We have copies of a guide detailing this process, which you can find on the table where you signed in. Second, you can also submit express comments by visiting fcc.gov/ECFS/filing/express. And once again, you can find that hyperlink in the guide at the sign-in table as well. And then lastly, you can also write your thoughts and comments today and give them to us at the end of the session. We have copies of a brief form for you to use for this purpose. And again, they're all available at the sign-in table. The FCC greatly values public participation in the rulemaking process, and your comments play a crucial role in shaping these regulations. To ensure your voice is heard, we kindly request you submit your comments through the provided channels. And to kick off this important discussion, we are privileged to have with us the Chairwoman of the Federal Communications Commission, Desiree Lumpkin. She is the first woman to ever permanently lead the commission in its more than 100-year history. And she has been an advocate for overlooked and underserved communities for her time in public service. Please welcome Desiree Lumpkin. Yeah.
All right. Does this work?
It works.
All right. It is an honor to be here in Illinois, and I am so grateful to Senator Duckworth, Lieutenant Governor of Illinois, for being here. And I'm really grateful to the Women's Justice Institute for having us here today, but more importantly, for what you do. And I also got to be honest with you, I'm never in a room with this many women. It's really neat. I mean that sincerely because I work in technology policy. In the tables I sit at, they're not that diverse. But here, I also want to tell you a little bit about what we're talking about today, which is about the high cost of prison phone services and how difficult it is for families to stay in touch, because it is also a story about women. It was 20 years ago that a grandmother named Martha Wright filed a document with the agency I oversee, the Federal Communications Commission, to tell us she was having difficulty paying to keep in touch with her grandson, who was imprisoned. She wanted to tell him about her nephew, what was going on with her nephew. She wanted to make sure he knew what was happening in her church. She wanted to make sure he had a lifeline to a future when he got out of serving time. And she asked the Federal Communications Commission to do something about it. And you know what? That petition, it sat on the shelf for many years. It gathered dust. It was in file cabinets. And then it took another woman, one of my predecessors I worked with, a commissioner named Mignon Clyburn, who said, we should do something about this. Nobody's paying attention, but what's happening isn't right. And so she got the Federal Communications Commission to start looking at rates for phone calls. And what we found was crushing. So many families were paying as much for a single phone call as most of us here pay for an unlimited monthly plan. And she convinced the Federal Communications Commission to do something about it. And we did. We lowered rates and we changed policies for junk fees they add to those bills. And then the courts told us, you don't actually have all the authority you think you do to do these things. And they sent some of our decisions back. So we had to go to Congress and say, we need more authority. We want to fix this. We're not done yet. These things that these women started, we're going to keep on working on them. And so we needed a champion in Congress. And Senator Duckworth is sitting here, who helped develop a law named for that grandmother, the Martha Wright-Reed Just and Reasonable Communications Act, which passed into law late last year and was signed by the president this year, that gives the Federal Communications Commission power to fix more phone rates. Instead of just fixing rates that are across state lines, we can now fix rates within state lines. 80% of the calls that are made to and from incarcerated people happen within a state. So we got a lot of work to do. And she also did something that's important. She had an eye towards the future, which was making sure that we don't just think about voice calls. The future is about video calls. So she gave us that authority too. The bottom line is that we have got to right this wrong. It's taken too long, but I want everyone to know a whole bunch of women are making it happen. And we're going to need the help of people in this audience to continue to make sure we right these wrongs, but we're committed to it. So that's all I wanted to say to you today. I'm so glad to be able to be here with you. Thank you for taking some time out of your day.
Hey, thank you.
Thank you, Chairwoman Rosenworcel, for sharing the FCC's ongoing efforts and your commitment around this work. We're honored to have U.S. Senator Tammy Duckworth with us today. Chairwoman already gave an introduction, but I will add on a little bit more. As the Chairwoman mentioned, Senator Duckworth introduced the Martha Wright-Reed Just and Reasonable Communications Act on May 10, 2021. And after much hard work and collaboration, Congress passed this bill and President signed it into law on January 5th, 2023. This legislation is a result of the dedication of the late Martha Wright, a grandmother who led the charge in 2003 to ensure families with incarcerated individuals had the ability to stay in contact with their loved ones by eliminating the burden of exorbitant calling rates. With the continued leadership of Senator Tammy Duckworth, the Martha Wright's initial effort led to the passage of this law. And with that, please welcome U.S. Senator Tammy Duckworth.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you, Chairwoman Rosenworcel, for being a champion of telecommunications justice. We're here today to discuss this huge step forward in phone justice and to hear some stories firsthand from Illinoisans who've been impacted by the criminal justice system. Picking up a phone call to call a loved one may sound simple, but its power is immeasurable, especially for the more than 2 million people who are incarcerated in this nation. Yet for far too many years, families were forced to spend outrageous sums to speak by phone with a loved one living miles away in a correctional facility. There were charges, not only was it a per minute charge, but it was the connection charge. And people were calling from who were incarcerated would have their call dropped 3, 4, 5, 6, 10 times. And each time that would drop, another $2 charge, another $3 charge. So at the end of the day, a single phone call could cost $50, $60, $70. That is absolutely unacceptable. It prevented children from being able to hear their parents' voices. It kept spouses from being able to say a simple, "I'm here for you," to their partners. And we must be clear, when unjust and unreasonable communication rates cut off an incarcerated person from vital connections, the harm extends beyond that family. It extends into our community. After all, the vast majority of incarcerated persons will eventually be released. And we all have a stake in making sure that our nation prepares our fellow Americans to navigate the daunting challenge of re-entry into our communities. ending a predatory status quo that enabled prison telecom providers to gouge the families of incarcerated people was a moral imperative, particularly for the more than 2 million children who have at least one parent who's incarcerated. And the evidence tells us that preserving connections helps to reduce recidivism, and it prevents repeat offenses. Preventing repeated offenses helps all of us. That's why it was so important to enshrine in federal law a clear and enforceable requirement that all prison communication rates, whether it is interstate or intrastate, must be just and reasonable. Fortunately, President Biden acted swiftly to sign my bipartisan Martha Wright-Reed Just and Reasonable Communications Act into law at the beginning of this year. The law's title appropriately honors the late Martha Wright-Reed, an incredible woman who established an incredible legacy that will live on in every preserved connection across our great nation. Her example is so powerful because it represents America at its best, a regular citizen refusing to remain silent in the face of injustice, and ultimately a regular citizen using her voice to galvanize the forces of change to right a long-standing wrong. Of course, restoring the FCC's authority to ensure prison communication rates are just and reasonable was only the first step. And I'm grateful that because of Chair Rosenworcel's leadership, the FCC is working around the clock to effectively implement this law. And today represents a critical part of this process. I'm a big believer in the principle that the best public policy results from first listening to the public one seeks to serve. And that is why we're here today. And now I'm going to turn this over to our wonderful Lieutenant Governor Stratton for the work that she's doing at the state. This is a whole partnership between federal and state, as well as the commission, because this could not take effect without all of us working together at all levels. Lieutenant Governor.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone. I am Lieutenant Governor Juliana Stratton, she, her pronouns, and it's such an honor to share space with each of you. To our wonderful Senator Tammy Duckworth, thank you for your leadership on this issue, but also for being such a fighter for Illinois every single day as you work in Washington, D.C. And of course, to FCC Chairwoman Jessica Rosenworcel, thank you so much for your advocacy and making sure that we could get to this point. We are here today to listen as this act now gets implemented. And I just want to again acknowledge Senator Duckworth's incredible leadership in passing and getting the Martha Wright-Reed Just and Equitable Communications Act signed into law. And I thank you both for honoring her and speaking her name and just recognizing that it is everyday Americans who decide something is not right and I want to see something different, who really make a difference in this world. I want to thank the Reclamation Center and WJI for hosting us today. As a state representative, I worked with many of you to pass the Women's Correctional Services Act, and I've always appreciated your leadership. And as a restorative justice practitioner, it's always important to me to recognize that the wisdom is in the room. The wisdom is found right here in this room as we think about how to build a justice system that better reflects our values, not one that is punitive, but one that is restorative and equitable and really meets the needs of the people who are justice impacted. Today's conversation is so important because it's imperative that we keep in mind how families and whole communities have been disrupted by our criminal legal system. Because it's never just the person that's in custody who is impacted. Family members and loved ones are also impacted. And I know many of you are here today. We know it's important for, not just important, but essential for people in custody to hear the voices of their children, to hear the comforting words of a parent, to get the supportive advice of their partners, and to have access to consult with their legal counsel. This is about centering humanity in this work. Because we are all communal people, right? We need to be able to connect with one another. And anytime there's a barrier to those connections, there is a level of injustice. I just want to say, by the way, and we'll talk about this more around what those fees really look like, but I just want to say that for Black and Brown communities, which are disproportionately impacted by the criminal justice system, this is not just a matter of economic justice. This is also an issue of racial justice. So the fact that you are all here today to participate in this conversation is so important. I lead something called the Justice, Equity, and Opportunity Initiative for the state of Illinois. Governor Pritzker established that by executive order. And so this conversation, I'm here to listen and learn from all of you, but also to work with these incredible leaders, as well as all of you in this room, to make sure that we pursue true justice for all. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lieutenant Governor Stratton. Now it's time to hear from those who have direct experience with voice and video communication services in detention and incarceration facilities. Chairwoman Rosenworcel, Senator Duckworth, and Lieutenant Governor Stratton will have the opportunity to introduce each speaker and ask questions to learn about their personal experiences and engage in a meaningful dialogue. I now invite current and former consumers of incarcerated people's communication services to join us on stage. Welcome to the stage, please. Welcome Mon Ariola, Sandra Brown, Desiree Lumpkin, Marlene Delgado, and Anna Navarro. We're settled in. All right. We will now have Chairwoman Rosenworcel introduce the first participant to share their experiences.
Thank you all for being here today, for choosing to use your voice so that other people can use theirs. I appreciate it. I'm going to start with Monse, and I want to say welcome. And as you probably know, for people who are experiencing incarceration and they've got to spend time away from their family and friends and the community they know best. And that's difficult. So at the same time, we recognize that maintaining connections to those family, friends, and community is so important to their viability when they move on with their lives. So I just want you to set the stage by describing how you experienced this firsthand, what it means to you, and any personal experiences you had with communications. So tell us your story.
First and foremost, I would like to say thank you, and it's an honor to be here today to be a part of this movement. I feel so inspired and just grateful. I never in a million years would have imagined sitting next to such powerful and motivating forces. So thank you for taking this serious, because yes, it's a very impactful situation. I was brought here when I was 2 years old. A little bit about me, and I grew up here like any normal American would. And so along my time growing up, I experienced a lot, and unfortunately I got into a very abusive relationship, and very quickly I was criminalized, and I went through a lot. So being incarcerated in the phone and in the visits, it was a lot to take in at first, especially once I was released, because I did 10 years in state prison for being in a situation with my abuser. And by the grace of God, I took the time to make the most of my time there. And when I was released, I made myself a promise that I was going to be able to make my dreams a reality and be able to set the tone for other family members that have been through the same things that I've been through, and educate the youth and be able to let them know, like, hey, this is not where you want to go. And being in contact with family members while you're incarcerated is very, very hard. And it's very limited due to the policies that we have, in that type of environment, with lockdowns and like the restrictions, especially when COVID came around. And so eventually I was released, and I was able to do a lot of good, positive things. And before you knew it, as I was starting to blossom and turn my life around and do everything that I said that I was going to do, ICE came and apprehended me, and I was thrown into a detention center for a year and 5.5 months. And my experience there was, I don't even have the words to describe. I had no access to any mental health. And the distance was terrible because I was out of state, because as you all know, if you don't know, we don't have detention centers here in Illinois. So I was transferred to Wisconsin. And so I was making out of state phone calls, which were very, very hard to make because a 20-minute phone call, and I was in a removal administration proceeding. So I didn't even have the chance at the time to see a judge or anything. So getting all this information to my family at the time was very hard because there was just so much. And then in may I say, in respect to my family, there's a lot of cultural things that I grew up with, and you just don't talk about certain things. So when legally I had to be brave and voice what I actually went through and what I was experiencing, it was very hard to get that out in a window period of 20 minutes for $750, I think, for a video call, $350 for a 15-minute call video. And then for the telephone, it was about $8 for 20 minutes. And I just kept calling, and before you knew it, I was experiencing making choices by having to choose good, nutritious food or call my family. And it put me in a situation where first of all, I was allergic to soy, so I had to consume the soy that they were giving me. And, it was just very, very, not fair decisions that I had to make because of the budget too. Like, obviously, when you're incarcerated, you can't work, you can't have a good job. So you depend on your family members and your friends and your support to help you get through communicating and staying in touch with humanity. And when I was in there, unfortunately, I spent a lot of money that could have went towards my education, could have went towards coming back home. By the grace of God, I was given a federal pardon, and my waiver was granted. And I get emotional thinking about that because I was given the opportunity to be here today to finally be heard, because my voice has been shunned for so long, I felt like, ever since I was 3. And now being able to sit here and be a part of this, this is very serious stuff. My partner of 12 years, I was with her for a long time. She went to desperate measures to be able to take care of me financially in there. And it was really hard because you think about being exiled from a lot of people in there, and you feel like you're not part of something. Today, I say this all the humbleness in my heart. I feel honored to be here today because communication with your family is very vital in there. There were so many times where I contemplated suicide. There were so many times where mental health was not given to me. So my mental health was my support system at home. My lawyers, my community with OCAD, with Anna Navarro, with, those were the little things that I did have to hold on to. And, it was just unfair to not be able to sit in an area where I can actually have a decent conversation with my family in regards to what I was really going through. I had the opportunity to have an amazing team through NIJC and SCADN, and my lawyers, my team of lawyers and representatives were just so, they went above and beyond. And I feel like because of them, I'm motivated to sit here today and have the courage to share these experiences with you. And I just want to once again say that it is very important that we stay connected with our families. And my mom had to, borrow money from family members because, it's just not affordable, and it's not feasible, and it's not fair, especially when we don't educate one another on the potential criminalizations that, domestic violence survivors go through, and also human trafficking survivors go through. And because you're so scared and you're intimidated, I mean, at least for me. And so being here today, I just want to say that that it was very hard. And right now, I think that I could have, I'm almost done with my associate's degree. That could have went towards paying my associate's degree. And unfortunately, right now, I'm waiting for my visas, to come through, and I'm trying to get involved as many community efforts as I can to try to, do something, because it's important that we just have that communication and that have that bond with one another, to support each other, like you all were saying. It's very important. And I just, I wish that, it would have been more affordable for me. That way I wouldn't have had to make those unfair decisions. And I'm just grateful that I was heard today. Thank you so much.
Can I just ask one follow-up question? First, I'll start with, I know why the tissues are on the table now.
Yes.
In addition to changing rates, which we all want to do because you shouldn't have to make those hard choices, is there anything else about communications that you would change based on your experience?
Sure. So there was only, we were only allowed like a certain amount of tablets for the virtual visits. And you can only imagine under the stress that certain women are in that environment. And it got really nasty sometimes. A lot of the times, I'm not going to lie. And I would say provide more electronical devices so that it could be more accommodating for everyone to be able to have that opportunity. Minus the fact that, like, we were always on lockdown, or there was a lot of obstacles that prevented us all getting a fair time video visiting our families, because sometimes we couldn't even have them physically come to the institution. So I would say more electronical devices that are equally distributed into the units where they're housing these people at. And as far as the phone rates go, yeah, they're very expensive, especially out of state. And so maybe there could be a way where instead of 20 minutes, maybe get a little bit more for the amount that we're paying. I mean, I know that life is not fair. However, it breaks families apart. It really does. Like, my family was fighting a lot. A lot of people went through a lot of desperate measures. And I just want to say that maybe implementing a new way of maybe having more time for the amount of money that you're being charged, and distributing, again, electronic devices in the environment.
Thank you so much. I'm going to pass it on to the Lieutenant Governor.
Thank you. And thank you for your words. That were so powerful. I am going to turn it over to Sandra Brown. Can we give it up for Sandra? Sandra and I did not meet today. I came to an event here, probably last holiday season. It was an arts event, and I walked by a table where someone was selling a book, and it was Sandra. The book is called Odyssey in Progress. And she had sold out the book, let's just say that. So really proud of that. But also, I want to tell you that Sandra is the first incarcerated woman in Illinois to earn an academic master's degree, and the first to be accepted into an academic doctoral program. Congratulations, Sandra.
Thank you. Thank you.
So, Sandra, I know that when we think about, and we just heard a little bit about the challenges and the impact it can have to not having access to basic communication with others. I want to talk about that in the context of your efforts to pursue higher education and the impact of barriers to either voice or video communication might have had on that. I know that the challenges to higher education is really what has driven you to continue your work as a student, as an educator, as a researcher, as an advocate, as an activist, and as a creative writer. So how did not having real access, and I think all of us know that education inside our corrections facilities, there's not enough opportunities for higher education. We have to do more. But how was that even further, what other additional burdens or barriers existed as you were trying to pursue those dreams?
Thank you, Lieutenant Governor. And thank you for sharing part of that. A lot of the challenges with respect to education inside, that's a huge thing that I want to lift up in this space today. I'll just go all the way back to when I began serving my 22-year sentence as an incarcerated survivor. I came into a system where collect phone calls were at the very least $30 a piece. And that was the only way to communicate with anyone in real time in the free community. I started my time in January of 2000. So video visits did not exist. Video communication, that was like, we saw that on cartoons like the Jetsons or something like that. So that was unheard of. During my time inside, I earned a pittance of $30 a month as a teaching assistant for almost 14 of those years. And with my mother working part-time for the Chicago Public Schools, earning only $10 an hour, she helped where she could with like hygiene items and underclothes. And charges for those 30-minute allotments, they applied whether I used the full 28 minutes, whether I was disconnected, or whether calls were interrupted. And I say 28 minutes because those charges included moments where throughout the calls, we were interrupted by these automated voice messages. Even right down to the beginning where it says, be aware, any calls are monitored and recorded. We're paying for that call the moment it's connected. So there are times during that call, we don't even get to talk and our families were being charged for it. But after about 3 years into my incarceration, my family just couldn't afford to pay for those calls anymore. And so I would write home whenever I could save to buy stamped envelopes. But the cost of voice or video communication made staying connected to my son, other family members, or any source of support for that matter, just impossible. I had to navigate challenges with getting access to education because of my sentence. Criteria meant that those who were shortest or closest to going home got access to those programs. And that's where I began turning to correspondence programs for my education. But preparing for a real chance at a successful reentry was incomprehensibly difficult. I can't begin to tell you what that's like when you're trying to do it from behind barbed wires and bricks. Many attempts, for example, to communicate like by snail mail were lost or discarded. Sometimes I received like delayed responses to my communication. And because of the way that things were set up at that time, I oftentimes missed application deadlines. As an undergrad and grad student, I couldn't make phone calls to college faculty or staff, primarily because my state issue pittance just didn't allow to pay for those kinds of calls. But also because policy nor practice did not allow educational institutions to accept collect calls. So consequently, I couldn't contact professors with time-sensitive questions about assignments or exams. I couldn't communicate with peers who were taking the same courses with me in the free community. And I was just without the benefit of contacting like the financial aid departments for private scholarships. I navigated the education arena at a time where people who were incarcerated didn't qualify for state or federal financial aid. So I relied heavily on private scholarships where I could get them. And so not having video or voice access to the very people who could help me with that part resulted in 1 year, just to personify the gravity of how hard it can be. I wound up asking for a whole year. I would ask housing unit officers if I could clean showers after the women were done so that I could collect the soap chips. And I would use the soap chips to wash my body and use that money that I would use to buy soap to pay for school. Yeah, I did that for a whole year. And so, I can't begin to tell you the impact that has not only on us, but on our children. I had a son that I was trying to encourage to stay in school. He'd lost his mom at 8. And so what was the point in continuing? And so I'm trying to encourage him, but at the same time, I'm having to choose between talking to him and saving for school. Occasionally, though, staff could reach out on my behalf to communicate with colleges about work, but that always depended on whether or not that communication was approved, working within the parameters of what was convenient for staff. And as my peer here mentioned, during lockdowns, those communications just did not happen. And so to say that access to voice or video communication would have made an impact in my educational journey, I mean, that's a huge understatement to say the least. Now, remember, I shared with you that I entered the system at a time when there were no video visits. So the advent of these video visits and tablets and MP3 players magnified for me, like the impact of the digital divide that it had on people who are incarcerated. These video communications also came with a cost that was too expensive for many of us and our families to pay for. Again, for me, I reiterate regarding my story that practice nor policy didn't allow for educational facilities to just set up a video call for me one-on-one so that I could talk to professors about questions. I couldn't hop online with my peers who were taking classes online in the community. I couldn't engage in chats. I couldn't submit assignments electronically because I didn't have access to those forms of communication. After I graduated with my master's degree, I spent 2 years looking for a doctoral program while inside. And I could not get accepted into a program, not because I was an unsuitable candidate, not because there were any questions about whether or not I could complete the work or whether I could compete on the same level as a student in the free community. The only reason I kept getting rejected during those 2 years is because I lacked digital access. That was the only reason. Again, I couldn't speak with instructors. I couldn't submit assignments. I remember sharing with someone here today that during my master's program, when I was finishing up, I had to rewrite an entire master's thesis all over again. Not because there was anything wrong with rubric, anything wrong with my argument, but because my margin was a ½ inch off on the left side. And so I spent 4 days retyping an assignment that could have taken maybe 4 seconds had I had digital access. And so I say all of this to say that even when voice and video communications seem to be operative in carceral settings, for people who are desperate to enter the community, able to be restored to useful citizenship, because I mean, we hear that that's supposed to be the whole objective of corrections. Many of us still lacked what we needed the most in order to come back successful.
Whoa, like that. Yes, your words are so powerful. And, you know, one of the things that you said so much that I know touched many in this room. One was talking about the digital divide, which typically when we hear that phrase, and those of us in policymaking hear the word or phrase digital divide, but we often think about it in terms of, you know, rural communities or other, you know, certain urban communities. And I don't think that we often use that term to relate to the carceral system. And so the idea of you helping us to reframe that in this conversation is really important, but also that you talked about those 2 minutes. And that really stuck with me as well. The fact that 2 minutes of not communicating with someone, whether it's a family member, a child, someone that you needed to talk to as you pursued your education, that 2 minutes is a long time when you don't get to talk to people. Like if you just hear 2 minutes, somebody might think, well, that's 120 seconds. But when you haven't talked to someone and all you have is those 30 minutes, those 2 minutes are everything. So that was powerful. And then of course, to just hear how you persevered and your brilliance to do what you did on the inside, to not just get your master's, but also get into a doctoral program. It's remarkable. It's remarkable. So my question to you, Sandra, is there what 1 or 2 things in Monse, am I saying your name? Monse. Excuse me, Monse. Monse talked about more digital devices. What 1 or 2 things do you think, in addition to what's happening with, you know, making calls more accessible, what are 1 or 2 more things that you would recommend to really change the communication services that are available within corrections facilities?
Well, I think some of those changes we're starting to see in other places. In California, the calls are free. People who are incarcerated can reach out to their families and friends and loved ones and not have to worry about whether or not they have to choose between buying soap for their body or talking to their children. So my colleague Colette said federal calls free, the first 1,000 minutes a month free. So I'm thinking that it's definitely doable, and I would love to see that happen for our brothers and sisters who are behind the walls here in Illinois. But I also saw something happen during COVID and often during lockdowns that inspires the recommendation that was lifted here. The tablets that we were allowed access to, they gave us digital entertainment, but not any real connection to family, friends, or resources. I think those tablets should also be used to be able to communicate with family, friends, and loved ones. And that communication should be free. I can't begin to imagine in a day room full of people who are fighting for time on the phone, what would happen if we didn't have to fight for that time on the phone because everyone had access to these devices and were able to talk to their people minus that competition. So those are the two things I'd like to see happen.
Thank you, Sandra, for sharing those thoughts and ideas, and of course, sharing your story. Very powerful. I'm going to turn it back over to Chairwoman Rosenworcel.
Thank you. We've just heroically heard about how you're using your voice to talk about your experiences and how to improve communications. But I want to talk about a different kind of heroism right now. So I want to talk to Desiree Lumpkin. So you're currently the caretaker of 4 grandchildren while your daughter is incarcerated. And I just want to acknowledge that's a different kind of heroism. And I feel like you too have stories to tell about what it's like to stay in touch with your daughter and ensure that those children maintain a relationship with her. Because we all know maintaining those ties is good for everyone involved, but also good for all of us because it reduces recidivism. So I want you to talk about what this looks like from your perspective and tell us your story.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon to everyone on the panel. Thank you all for the opportunity to speak and share my story, what I'm experiencing right now. So I am the mother. My daughter is incarcerated. She has 4 children, ranging from the ages of 17 months to 12 years old. Did I think that I would have to raise my 4 grandchildren into supporting my daughter? No. But I am very happy that they're with me because they're safe. I'm raising them as though I was raising, I have 4 children. So I'm raising them as I had 4 children. But it's difficult with the communication as far as them being able to speak with mom. It's difficult. They may speak to her maybe a week and a half to every 2 weeks, if that. If it had not been for WJI with the reunification bus ride, we wouldn't have a in-person visit. That visit has been helping, but the children still ask about their mother. When can we see our mom? When can we talk to our mom? And I do my best to explain to them, she'll be calling soon. We're going to go see her soon, things like that. And it kind of settles them down, but then it comes right back up. I miss my mommy. I love my mommy, things like that. The baby doesn't remember my daughter. So it's even more hurtful that when we do go and see her, he doesn't go to her. He cries. for about half of the time that we're there, but then he kind of comes around for about an hour before it's time to leave. He may give her a little smile or let her pick him up. I feel the video visit, I was denied for a video visit. I signed up, I was denied, and I'm right now in the process of trying to get reinstated to, not reinstated, I'm sorry, but just trying to get access to the video visits, because those would help when we're unable to go physically to see their mom. That video, at least them seeing her, and I really feel for the baby, if he see her face more often, he'll get comfortable and, you know, kind of put it together like, oh, this is mom. My daughter and I we almost look like twins. So he sees me, then when he see her, it's almost like, okay, but he's with me all the time, you know, so it's difficult. But as I stated, love my grandchildren, wouldn't trade them for the world. Not only that, I'm standing here speaking on behalf of my daughter and for her support. I speak for all the mothers that are in the facility, their families who are going through. I speak for all of them because collectively we need to all stick together, rally together, support one another. And I think what you all are doing with this platform definitely will help that and help push this law to get, it's already passed, but to get things more in effect quickly. I'm getting kind of caught up because I get emotional when it comes to, as you say, paying for the cause or on the financial side. I get a little finance for the children, but in the system, we ask for the kids to stay together. That's what the system says. We want the kids to stay together. They are together, but I feel like I'm not receiving the support from the system as I should with taking them. That might be a separate conversation, like later or maybe afterwards. But again, finances, support would definitely or should definitely be looked at much more further. Very much so much further. And I don't know if I took up too much time. But thank you all for listening.
Can I ask a follow-up? It's so important to think about calls now as not just voice calls, but where technology is going. And we all know that's video calls, but you said you were denied. And I'm curious if you could describe just what that was all about.
So with the video calling, you have to sign up for it. And so I did the process with the application, everything online. It had been some time went past. And as I was thinking, like, okay, I should have received some type of response back or something. Well, I did. I received an email stating that my request was denied. No real explanation, but that it was denied. So, and then also to try and reach out to that department. You're on the phone, you're not getting an answer. The communication with the system on that level is very bad also.
I think the Lieutenant Governor is listening.
Yes. We're right here. We will help. We'll talk to you.
Okay. Okay.
I don't know what the reason was, so I can't say what the outcome, but in terms of connecting and getting a reason and understanding.
Yes. Okay. Thank you so much.
We're going to turn it over to Senator Duckworth.
So I'm going to turn, I know Anna and her cousin Marlene were here, but Marlene's taking care of her nephew. So I'm going to ask Anna, and thank you for being here today. I know a Cook County judge just vacated Anna's conviction this week and dismissed all charges against her. So congratulations on your release.
Thank you. Thank you.
She's had about 4 hours of sleep in over 24 hours to get here because she was just released from detention. And I know, Anna, you were only 19 when you were incarcerated. Can you please share your personal experience relying on the communication services that were available during your time?
Yes, so
Thank you.
I got locked up in 2010, and the phone calls when I got locked up in county jail were $7. It was like 3 something, 4 something for a connect call, for it to connect. Yes, like a few girls said, it dropped constantly. You lost communication, and in that time, it's like I'm locked up. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm trying to figure out what's going on with my life. I'm trying to let my family know what's going on, and I'm in a place that I'm not used to, obviously, and it's a whole different world. It's easy but hard to describe, just being there and away from your family, not seeing the people that you're used to talking to every day. And when you're going through things emotionally, like my cousins, me and her raised like sisters. During those times, I wanted to call her, like, just cry and vent to her, and I couldn't because I was limited in that time on who I could call and how many times I could call. And then during my graduation and when I'm going, and even them driving to see me was expensive. It was 3 hours drive, 4-hour drive to see me. And when they started the video phone calls in 2020, the video visits, I had my first visit with my aunt in 2020 after my grandma had passed away, and I hadn't seen my aunt in 7 years. And the thing froze where she couldn't see me, but I only saw the shot. She got stuck seeing a picture of an officer, not me. And that was her first visit, and then it dropped, and they never refunded her back afterwards. They never let her reschedule a visit. And with those visits still going on in Logan Correctional, like say for instance, my nephew has autism. If I was still locked up in Logan Correctional, I couldn't have a video visit with him because your family cannot move around. If your family's having a birthday party, there's nobody, there cannot be no movement or else they will shut down your visit. If a kid runs in the background, if a cat runs in the background, they literally shut down your video visits and even deny and block your family from video visiting anymore. And where I was at right now in the immigration detention facility, I know for a fact we're there. For 8 months, and between my family and friends and loved ones paying for the video visits, phone calls, and annually, it was like about $1,000 and some I spent in 8 months in trying to communicate with my family. And like all of us, she has said and everything, it was a choice. Like, do I get to buy eat some basic ramen to survive during the month, or do I call my family? Do I buy this bar of soap, or do I use the state and stuff that irritates? Like me, I have psoriasis, irritates my psoriasis. But I'd rather call my family, talk to them, especially with going to courts and fighting for my freedom and my life. Like, I chose to call my family than to take care of the basic needs that I needed. It's one thing I do like that where I was at, like we had the option to really call our family when we can. They get to acceptance and stuff, and we called. It wasn't scheduled. You could schedule it too, and that was a nice thing to be able to call them and be able to call them whenever we had a chance. But the video dropped too. The connect dropped. The text messages sometimes will freeze and they won't go through to the next day or two or at all. And they will charge us for those text messages. Still, it never refunded us in that time. And like, I had to choose, and it ruined a lot of some relationship of mine, my lack of being able to call, ruined my relationship that I have with somebody, and it put a strain on my relationship with my family. Because they're like, it put a strain and just wasn't the same as I was, because I was blessed to be home for 3 months before ICE picked me up. And yes, it's 3 months, but it was short. But I built connections with my family, and it was hard. Like my nieces constantly cried because I didn't call them a lot, and it was very hurtful. Like not being able to talk to them, and they're like, "Well, why aren't you calling? Why can't we see you? Why can't we do this?" I'm like, I can't. It's very expensive, and where I was at, Dodge is one of the few detentions for immigration and federal that do not get the free 10 national and 10 international phone calls they're supposed to get a week. That is one of the only ones that do not get those phone calls. That will impact a lot. Like, I'm blessed that where I was at was a reentry house, party house, when ICE picked me up and they had emergency, like the girls there had emergency contact with each other, and they were to get a hold of my family to call my lawyer so they could let my lawyer know that I got picked up. If I wouldn't have had that, I don't know how I would have probably been deported by them. Because they don't help you call your family, they don't let you, there's no way of communication, and Like my sister, when I first got there, they tried to put money in the phone. She put $5 in the phone. They charged her $8 tax. $8 tax to put $5 in the phone on her side. My cousin put like 20 each day, and he paid $100 and some dollars to put $20 on 3 phones. And they're like, we can't do it no more. And it was hard, but people have bills, they have life, they have rent, and you have to choose. Can we communicate with the person that's inside, or do we pay rent? Do we buy food? Do we get the kids school supplies that they need? You know, it's hard.
Well, thank you for sharing your story. Just so you know, ICE came and found her at Hardin House, which is a home for women who were recently released from prison. So she's been released on good behavior, and ICE came and found her at a place where she was trying to reintegrate back into society. In fact, her conviction has been dismissed, was vacated, and all charges dismissed against you. And thanks in part to the work of your attorneys. Can you talk a little bit, Anna, about the importance of and your experience with how you communicated with your attorney and other resources during ICE detention?
Yes. So during my time there, I was limited to my lawyer scheduling the phone calls whenever they had one open, and talking to her between. Sometimes they'll tell her we have an hour phone call scheduled, and they're trying to like, no, we're gonna have half an hour. We have somebody else coming in. Because for instance, where I was at, I couldn't call her directly because our phone call number will show up as spam. So if you have a spam blocker, we can't call you. It's gonna get blocked. Same thing with when we were sending like emails to our families to let them know how to add ours into GTL and stuff. It will go directly to the spam folder, and our family will never get a notification that we're trying to add them as our contact to video or text. So it's very limited on the phone calls with them, and sometimes the officers try to get you off because they don't want to deal with other people and they want to put them in that room and stuff, and they will interrupt your legal phone calls with your lawyer.
Thank you. It sounds like we need to work on some of the refunds, and we need to talk about this being marked as spam and the text messages as well. I think we have some homework to do. I'm going to turn this back.
And before I close this out, Chairwoman, if you want to offer any closing remarks?
Can we just have a round of applause for these people and their amazing stories? They say justice delayed is justice denied. And we've been waiting a really long time to fix prison phone services. Way too long. And we've been working on it way too slowly. But despite all that, I actually feel really optimistic right now. Because for the first time ever, we passed a law that the president signed that gives us authority to fix this. Because for the first time ever, we're seeing states and cities around the country addressing this with free and low cost calling. And also I feel optimistic as people like you have decided to dedicate your voices and let people know what this sounds like, what it feels like, what it means for your families, and how that burden that you bear is something we should all share, because everyone in this country deserves access to communications. And that is whether you're incarcerated or not, it is all of us. When we say everyone, we've got to remember that. So we are on our way to righting this wrong, and I'm grateful for all of you. I'm really grateful for the senator for championing this bill. Thank you all for being here.
All right. I don't know how to follow that up. The tissues are really necessary. But just thank you to all our distinguished guests and participants for joining us today. We heard some incredibly compelling stories. that emphasize the importance of fair and accessible communication services at just and reasonable rates at detention and incarceration facilities. And as your moderator, I think often when you work in policymaking spaces, it is as hard as it is to hear, it is incredibly reinvigorating on our end to know that we have real folks who are doing this work here on the ground, and we're here in DC trying to support and make sure that your lives are better. And just means a lot. So thank you guys for being vulnerable with us, because it's not easy. It's not easy at all. And with that, I just want to let folks know, as I mentioned before, that there are ways to make sure your voice is heard also in this rulemaking process. It's really, really important. There are guides at the sign-in table of how to submit public comments into this rulemaking proceeding, and please, those don't go ignored at the commission. We read those, we analyze those. Those are ways that, when folks are asking about, whose voice and whose perspectives are you hearing about for this rule? I want to make sure that everyone in this room who has direct experience, that your voice is in the record too. So please pick up one of those guides before we leave. And that concludes our listening session on just and reasonable rates and charges for incarcerated people's communication services. Let us continue our efforts to ensure that everyone has the opportunity to connect and communicate. Thank you all for being a part of this important discussion. Have a wonderful rest of your day. And for those who have arrived for the press conference, please know we'll get started shortly in a few minutes. And the press conference will take place in this room. Thanks to everyone for being here.